So, one fest, one hobby, all of that's finally behind us. Thanks for watching those super long videos if you did, but now that they're done, I finally had the opportunity to unbox some figures, and I want to talk to you guys about them today. I'm sure you saw that Hatsune Miku Shimian Maifu version in the thumbnail, and I got a lot to say about that one. That'll be a little bit later, but I'm very excited to get to it. Before we get to any figures though, I do want to unbox this one little package from Mercari JP though, very quickly. So let's do it. This is actually some clothing, some apparel, if you will. I hope this actually fits me. I'm not sure if it will, but I do have this as well. This is the Catch Hat from Moon Remix RPG Adventure. Talked about that game so many times. One of my favorites. I won't bore you this time. Now, I don't really look that good in hats. That's why I always wear beanies instead, or this specific one. But I do know somebody who would look pretty good in this hat, so I guess I'll go give it to them. There you go. Anyway, this is a Oyasumi Poon hoodie from, I believe, Granif is the company name. How do I open this, actually? I guess I just tear into it. This is pretty cool, I can't lie. I like the big Poon in the back. I don't know if that's getting picked up on camera. I can't really tell. I guess I should try it on. I don't really want to wear it right now. It's kind of hot in this room, but I'll give it a go. I won't zip it up, but pretty comfy, gotta say. I like the little image of God in the pocket. I'll get a B-roll shot of that. And you got Poon on the front here. Anyway, let's get to those figures. All right, so first up, I want to talk about a figure that's actually been behind me this whole time. I'm gonna go grab it. Make sure she doesn't like fall off of this kind of flimsy base, and I'll get to that in a second. Here we have the Sakura Kinomoto Furyu 25th anniversary version. I don't think I've ever mentioned this, and some of you guys have definitely noticed that I have some like pretty big Sakura figures behind me at this point. Anytime you see this character or any character from the franchise, just know that all of those figures are my girlfriends. However, Cardcaptor Sakura, it's a classic. I really like the 90s anime, and I'm happy that she introduced me to it. This series, though, gets so many godlike figures. I wouldn't call this one godlike, but I do think this is actually a pretty dang exciting release. Now, I don't know everything about the series, but I can tell you that a lot of the figures are never based off of the anime specifically, whereas this figure actually is. Plus, she's wearing her rollerblades, which I would say is pretty iconic. It's just nice to get a figure of her not only just wearing this outfit, but just so inspired by the anime's just, look. It's very apparent when you look at her face, specifically her eye decals, as well as the color of her hair, which is much more brown on this figure compared to how most of her other scales go for orange instead, which is more of like a manga thing as well as like a more recent look for her, like in the Clear card arc, I believe. Hopefully I'm not getting any of this wrong, but the 90s inspiration is just like front and center on this figure. And it's a very like dynamic, like full of energy figure too, as she's leaping in the air. Her books are flying out of her book bag, as well as like Keto-chan just holding onto the bag as well. Bit of a shame he has to be like supported with that little acrylic piece, which you don't assemble yourself. This is just how the figure is out of the box, and I wouldn't recommend trying to take it off. It seems like pretty tight on there. But I guess on the topic of just like assembly, I would say the base and just like how you put this figure together is easily the worst part about this figure. Certainly not a deal breaker, but it is unnecessarily hard to get that peg into her rollerblade. It was a struggle to assemble this figure, and it's so simplistic. There's only 2 steps. But that one step takes you so long, and it just feels so difficult. And then there's the acrylic stand, which you place underneath the knee pad, which feels pretty necessary. This figure is very wobbly otherwise. Would have been really nice if they did something else with this base. I do like the colors and the design of the base, having that like really bright blue sky and the Sakura petals. It's very fitting for Sakura, but I just wish like maybe there were some extra petals just flying around her to maybe hide the stands that are keeping her up in the air. Something like that could have elevated this figure even higher, and maybe even make this like one of the essential Cardcaptor Sakura figures to get. But this cheery vibe, this very colorful palette, and this wonderful sense of flow and movement just all adds up to a very solid release from the company. You're not going to be blown away with like the shading or any of the sculpting details, but I think this is a pretty unique release that was handled very well. Couldn't find any quality control issues, and the size is pretty good too. For a 1/7 scale, I think she leans on the bigger side, if anything, like almost going to the 1/6 scale. So yeah, I recommend this one. I think she's great. So next up, we're going to talk about the Strawberry Shortcake Bustier girl from Max Factory. Pretty sure this one is very popular at this point. A lot of people want this figure. Pretty sure it's still in stock, not too hard to find, but that might change over time. Now, I have to apologize. I don't have the unboxing footage for this figure, or the Sakura one now that I think about it, but that's because neither of these two figures are mine. And in the case of the Strawberry Shortcake Girl, I heard that it was very easy to break, and I didn't want to be the reason that it broke, so I wasn't about to go near that. Thankfully, we didn't break anything, so that's good. Though I will say, just looking at the assembly and like how it was all put together, I feel like this base was very half-assed. Like Max Factory had a good idea and then skipped the step that would have made this like more efficient or just like better put together, just like easier for the consumer. I'm really not the biggest fan of this base, like at all, and I think that might make people a little bit angry. Like I don't really see the benefit in having the strawberries and the whipped cream be individual pieces. You have like these 6 little pieces that you just place wherever you want to, which in my opinion is always going to look a little bit messier unless you're like so meticulously placing them and then never touching or moving this figure again. You also have that little logo down there, kind of looks like a store sign, very cutely designed might I add, and that is also an individual piece. But because of how thin it is, I think that makes more sense to have in its own like little blister when you're packing it, because that's why you would break these pieces up if you didn't want them to break during transit. But I don't think anything's gonna happen to the strawberries or the whipped cream. Now, on the other hand, to play like devil's advocate, this also means you could place all of these pieces wherever you want to, so there's some customization to it. So if you look at it from that angle, it might even be a plus. But you know, I just wanted to throw my opinion in the ring, see if anybody agrees with me. Thankfully, all of these individual pieces do look pretty good, like the whipped cream and the strawberries are pretty dang ace in my opinion in terms of the sculpting. Really like how you could see inside of the strawberries as well. It makes them look a little bit more real and tasty as a result. And thankfully, everything else about this figure, primarily regarding Miss Strawberry Shortcake herself, I think was extremely well done. She's very pretty, and I like this vintage antique approach they just took with her character design, having that like rotary phone and just like the design of the stool she's leaning on. It just feels like something from like the 50s or 60s, and I really do dig it because they're also mixing in like this more modern anime girl aesthetic. Like she doesn't look like she's from a bygone era. She looks like she's from an anime that's airing right now. And she has a very, very pretty face. I love her eye decal specifically, that really lovely shade of purple, very long eyelashes as well, and her lips actually like having lipstick and purse a little bit. Last nitpick, I swear, but I feel like her face should have a little bit of blush applied to it. Maybe it's there and it's really subtle, but considering how dolled up her appearance is, I feel like blush would make a ton of sense here, even a little bit. Just like a little bit of red hue on her cheeks. It just feels like something's missing. Her hairstyle though, the drills that are curling down on one side of her head, that looks amazing. The shading, the sculpting, the little strands that are breaking out of the curls, and that strawberry hair accessory, really cutely designed. I like the seeds that they placed on it. The leaves are nicely sculpted. But I gotta say, I really like her color palette as well, primarily white and pink with like some red accents on like the frills, her heels, the strawberries of course, and then most interestingly in my opinion is this teal that they've incorporated into the design, like on the rotary phone, on the stool, even her fingernails are painted in the same color. And I really like the application. I never would have thought of using this color here, but seeing it in action, I'm a big fan. I really am. Other things I should mention before I wrap up this part of the video is that her heels are painted in a really nice pearlescent red, and the way they sculpted the fishnets, like they're not actually using fabric here, but they've etched in the lines for the fishnets, so it has this like texture to it. And then like at each crossing, there's like a little white dot, which I think is supposed to be like pearls, but they're not actually pearlescent, which is fine. Still looks very good from afar or up close. And I think the other thing I forgot to mention that I should have earlier is that for a 1/7 scale, she does kind of lean on the smaller side in my opinion. I was expecting this figure to be a little bit taller. But yeah, if you don't really have any issues with like the base that I mentioned earlier, then I do think this is a very solid release. And even with like the nitpicks and all the issues I do have with the base itself, not really a deal breaker. I just feel like Max Factory, for as like well-renowned as they are, could have done a bit better with like everything down there in my opinion. Alright, so next up, I am excited about this one. Here is Marcille adding color to the dungeon from Good Smile Company. Pretty expensive figure, around 28,000 yen, which was one of the reasons I didn't initially pre-order this figure. That, plus I never read the manga or watched the anime at the time of this figure going up for pre-order, but now that I have, this just felt like something I needed for the collection. As a side note, I bought this figure from the Golden Nook, which is a US-based store. Never used them before. I see them advertised on MFC all the time. Had a good price, figured I'd try them out since I was late to the show anyway. And for some reason, they gave me this little bag with like Marcille on it and their name. I don't know if they give stuff away like this all the time, but I do appreciate it. There's your free advertising for you. Hit me up if you ever want to work with my channel. Anyway, Marcille. This one is just so inspired in my opinion. Having the whole ecosystem of the world from Dungeon Meshi in one figure is fucking awesome. They've surrounded Marcille with all of these lovely references from the series, the fauna, the monsters, the foliage. It's just beautiful, and it just feels so alive. I mean, I'll admit I'm not really sure how much I like the pumpkin's face that much. It's still a little creepy looking to me, that's certainly the point, but the jackalope are very cute. The walking mushroom just chilling off to the side, certainly a vibe. I've always loved the simplicity of her familiars, those red birds that are like all around her. One sleeping, very cute. And then on the back of the figure, easily the best addition is the golem, which you might even miss if you never turn this figure around, and you're certainly not going to see it that often, but its inclusion is very welcome and easily my favorite part about this base. But like, everything down here looks amazing. How the mushroom's all wrinkly and deflated because it's tired, the fluffy fur of the jackalope, the skin of the pumpkin's a bit dirty and weathered, the stone underneath everything else that's all cracked up and kind of overgrown by moss just to show its age. And while Marcille's design isn't that complex or anything, I do feel like they hit all the right notes here. There's two different shades of blue, there's some stitching on the hood, and like the sleeves look like they were sewn at the last minute. There's some creases and wrinkles throughout the outfit, of course, just to make it look a little bit more realistic. Some pouches and belts around her waist. Her blonde hair and green eyes complement the colors found elsewhere, and the shading throughout pretty much everything I just mentioned is nuanced and beautiful. Like, even the foliage looks so lush on this figure. The wood grain on Marcille's staff looks so cool as it just twists down the pole. And I should mention, this figure had like no assembly to it. All you do is take her out of the box and then give her staff. That's it. There's like one small hole that the staff plugs into, and then you're done. Simple as can be. That's the way I like it. I have heard some complaints in the past about Marcille's face, how it doesn't look exactly right, and I don't really agree with that. I think this looks exactly like Marcille, but I do wish she was a little bit more expressive. This gentle smile is very cute, but like, that's not the first thing I think of when it comes to Marcille or just the show in general. Everybody is just so expressive in Dungeon Meshi, Marcille as well. But at the same time, maybe that wouldn't have fit the vibe. Like if she was like even happier here, her mouth was open, huge grin, right? Or like she was mad or something, that wouldn't fit this at all. So I think this was a very good approach. I don't see this as a fault at all, but I can understand if you were looking for something a little bit different when it comes to Marcille. I'm really struggling to think of like anything negative to say about this Marcille figure. Not that I have to, but just to like be a little bit more critical, you know? But I think it's a perfect release. There's like nothing wrong with it. I'm really impressed. Even like the book has visible text in a language I can't read, but like I love when like they actually print it very clearly, so it looks like it was actually pulled from the universe of Dungeon Meshi. Like even the texturing on the golem to make it look like actual rock, that's awesome. Like they didn't need to do that. You're not even gonna see the golem half the time, but the love was put in. The love was put in everywhere. There's just so much to look at here. The sculpting's superb and the paint apps are sublime. And it really does make you reminisce about like the good times you've had watching or reading the series. And in my opinion, that's kind of what it's all about. Well, you waited long enough. I think it's finally time we start talking about the Hatsune Miku Shimian Maifu version from Good Smile Company, an extremely expensive figure at around like 36,000 yen. For a 1/7 scale, that's pretty damn high. But as you can see, this is pretty spectacular looking. Now, assembling this figure is horrible. I don't want to say this is like the worst figure I ever had to put together, but it's definitely up there. And really it's only like one part of the figure. Now, I do have the footage for this. It might not be the best footage, but my main issue with the assembly has to do with this orange ribbon that is circling Miku and being held up by these 3 little birds, because one of those birds just will not go into place. It is so finicky. You have to plug it into one of her hair pieces that look like a flower, and even though it's like very clear where you're supposed to put it, it just will not slot in. I spent at least 20 minutes trying to get that in. I just spent so long and I finally got it in place and it's not even in all the way, which is so aggravating, but as long as I don't touch it, nobody's gonna notice. But it was kind of surprising to me that you also had to put in Miku's left arm because that's also attached to the ribbon, but it's so close to the strings on the instrument. And you could actually like strum those strings. They're so fragile feeling though that I would highly recommend not doing that because it feels like you could break those if you're a little bit too rough on them. There's like 3 arrows you stick into the rocks on the bottom, and they're all like slightly different sizes, so it's like a little annoying to figure out which one goes where, but if you just read the instructions, it should be good. There's that flame that's circling Miku on the bottom as well. That one's pretty simple to figure out, though every single step is like, make sure you put this here, make sure you pay attention to like how this is angled, because you're supposed to put it like in front of stuff or behind stuff. I think the most obvious example of this is the ink streak that's like slightly above her head, because you're supposed to put it in front of the instrument, but it's so easy to have it be behind it if you're not paying attention, which was how I did it the first time, and then had to take it out, put it back in, and then it's like slightly rubbing against the bird up top, and it's like, this is too close, it's bothering me, I really don't like this, but it is what it is, that's how it's supposed to go. And honestly, I hope I never have to put this together ever again. But I know I'm going to have to because I don't think I'm going to live here forever. So I'm dreading the day that happens. Now, something else that kind of sucks about this figure, which is a real shame and feels like an oversight, is that this figure like slides around so easily and is kind of wobbly too. Like it feels like the weight is slightly leaning a little bit more backwards, so if you're not careful, she could very easily fall down. So in my opinion, I feel like you should put a felt rug or something that will make her like a little bit more resistant to movement, because I really feel like she needs it. This is something that would just shatter if it fell down. Everything about this figure is so fragile. Not just the ribbon or the birds or the flames around her, but even her hair. All of her hair strands are just so brittle feeling, which is nuts. Why is this like the most fragile feeling figure ever made? Now that being said, and I've certainly said a lot to this point, is this figure worth it, considering how much of a pain in the butt this is to put together and how easy it probably is to break? Abso-fucking-lutely. This is a beautiful, legit piece of art, in my opinion, and certainly would be like the highlight in anybody's figure collection. The only like real issue outside of all of that is that she's like a little short, like maybe a little bit smaller than you might be expecting for a 1/7 scale, but like, wow, this is absolutely stunning and is just a testament to the talent, the craftsmanship of the sculptors, the painters, and everybody else who's worked on this figure. In fact, I'm pretty sure the designer of this Miku arts, like the art that this figure is based on, also designed like a few figures from Mythos. None of these are my figures, they're my girlfriend's, but I'll give you like a little showcase of all 3 of them together. Pretty sure they're like from the same artist, and if I'm wrong, then I'm not going to include this part in the video. Frankly, I don't even really know where to begin when describing this figure. There's just so much you could focus on, like a really dignified look, the fact that they're trying to resemble a traditional ink painting. She's on like a battlefield surrounded by fire. Her dress is so thin. It looks like it's wet with like the way it's kind of like hugging her body so tightly. But I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be like razor thin just so it can like highlight the shape of her body. In fact, like Miku's whole appearance looks a little bit more mature here, and I think that's just because of like the design for her eyes and her face overall. It's really hard to pick like a favorite part about this figure when it's all just so goddamn impressive. Like the flow of her twin tails and the sashes around her waist just flowing and just moving around her. Such a beautiful sense of dynamism. Like it's not wild or anything. It's all contained in this rather small surface area, but just because of like how many strands of hair are like circling around her. And the paints on this figure too, the colors are so vivid, the gradation is stellar. Look at like how dark her hair strands get as you go towards the bottom of the figure. And I just love how they used gold for the flames. That is so sick looking. The gold on this Miku just accentuates everything that it's a part of. The flames, the instrument, her hair piece and accessories. It's just, I don't even know what else to say. I am floored at how nice this figure turned out. There's more I could point out, of course, like how her dress is burnt, just like from the scenario being surrounded by the fire. But you're looking at this, you know how stunning it is. I highly recommend it if you could find this, but like, it's not really that easy right now. People kind of slept on this one a little bit, and now they want it, now that she's finally been released. Because for some reason, Miku figures are actually becoming like kind of desirable and also harder to find. Like, I don't think they're making a surplus after the pre-orders end. So that strategy of waiting for the figure to come out and then picking them up on the aftermarket isn't really working anymore for these top-class Miku figures, at least from Good Smile Company. Like the Strawberry Miku, that one's like 100,000 yen right now. There's the 16th birthday version, which is pretty expensive, and now this one. I don't keep up with all of them. There's probably more, but it seems like if you really like one of the Good Smile Company Miku figures that are coming out, you should probably just pre-order it and not worry about trying to save a couple of bucks, because you're going to end up having to spend way more down the line. So yeah, I guess that's going to do it for this video. Definitely talked about her for a very long time, and I need to wrap this up. So thank you very much for watching. Let me know if you liked any of these figures, if you disagreed with anything I said, or if you just want to let me know like what you guys recently picked up. I'd be happy to read that as well. Thanks for watching. If you want to support the channel, like the video, and I do have a Patreon now if you want to just support me that way monetarily. But that's going to do it for me. I'll catch you around. See you later. Hey, welcome to the end card. How you doing? We don't really have anything specific to talk about this time around, but I do want to thank the Patreon members for continuing to support the channel, as well as some special shoutouts to our highest tier members: Swoop, Nemia Dynaskull, Christy Eisenman, Aki Rusu, DT Perigi, Kaif Marie, and Magnitude. Next video up should be the pre-order roundup, but afterwards, I'm not really sure what's gonna come next. I do have a few ideas, not sure which one makes the most sense to do now. Always more stuff to unbox as well, but I guess we'll see. Even I don't know what's gonna come up next on this channel, but hopefully you'll be there, and hopefully you enjoy whatever it is I'm gonna make. Catch you later.